November 14th, 1985. New York City. Before dawn, the streets are quiet. Then, without warning, sirens. Dozens of unmarked cars move through Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. FBI agents in dark jackets pour out onto sidewalks, into apartment buildings, up narrow staircases. Doors are kicked open. Phones are seized. Men are pulled from their beds. By sunrise, something unthinkable has happened. For the first time in American history, the leadership of the American Mafia has been hit all at once. This was not just another raid. This was the beginning of the case that would nearly destroy La Cosa Nostra. For decades, the Mafia in New York had operated like a hidden government. 5 families, 5 bosses, each one controlling entire industries: construction, trucking, unions, gambling, loan sharking. And above them all, the Commission. Created in 1931 by Charles Luciano, the Commission was designed to prevent war between families. It acted as a board of directors for organized crime. Every major decision, murders, territory disputes, business arrangements, had to be approved. It was the ultimate power structure, and for decades, law enforcement could not touch it, because officially, it didn't exist. By the late 1970s, the Mafia was stronger than ever. The Gambino crime family was led by Paul Castellano, a calculating and business-minded boss who preferred boardrooms over street violence. The Genovese crime family operated under the shadowy leadership of Vincent Gigani, a man who famously wandered the streets in a bathrobe, pretending to be insane while secretly controlling one of the most powerful crime organizations in America. The Lucchese crime family was run by Anthony Corallo, known as Tony Ducks, a careful and disciplined leader who trusted very few. The Colombo crime family was under Carmine Persico, a ruthless and ambitious boss who continued to run his family even while in prison. And the Bonanno crime family was represented by Philip Rostelli, another imprisoned leader who still held power from behind bars. 5 bosses, 5 empires, untouchable, or so they believed. But inside the FBI, something had changed. For years, investigators had chased individual mobsters, soldiers, captains, even underbosses. But the structure always remained intact. Cut off one head, another would take its place. Then came a new strategy. Instead of targeting individuals, they would go after the entire system. At the center of this strategy was a law that had only recently begun to show its true power: the RICO Act, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Passed in 1970, it allowed prosecutors to charge leaders of criminal organizations for crimes they ordered, even if they didn't personally commit them. It was designed for organizations like the Mafia, and one man intended to use it: Rudolph Giuliani, a young, aggressive federal prosecutor with a reputation for taking on impossible cases. He had one goal: prove that the Mafia was not just a collection of criminals, but a single, coordinated criminal enterprise. The Commission. The challenge was enormous. Because the bosses were careful, they avoided direct involvement. They spoke in code. They used intermediaries. And most importantly, they never put anything in writing. To bring them down, the FBI needed something they had never had before: voices, real conversations, proof. The breakthrough came from surveillance. Agents began planting hidden listening devices, bugs, in locations where mob leaders felt safe: social clubs, private meeting rooms, cars. One of the most important targets was Anthony Corallo. Unlike many bosses, Corallo preferred to conduct sensitive business inside his car, a black Jaguar. He believed it was the safest place to talk. He was wrong. The FBI had secretly installed a bug inside the vehicle, and what they captured changed everything. On those recordings, Corallo spoke freely about murders, about extortion, about the Commission itself. He discussed how decisions were made, who approved them, and how the families worked together. For the first time, investigators were hearing the inner workings of the Mafia's highest level. Not rumors, not informants, direct evidence. At the same time, another investigation was unfolding. FBI agents were targeting the concrete industry in New York City. Billions of dollars in construction contracts, skyscrapers, bridges, entire city blocks, controlled not by legitimate companies, but by the Mafia. Through a system known as the Concrete Club, the families rigged bids, fixed prices, and divided contracts among themselves. Developers had no choice. Pay the mob, or the project doesn't happen. And behind it all, the commission. As evidence began to build, the scope of the case became clear. This was no longer about isolated crimes. This was about proving that the Mafia itself was a criminal organization, that the bosses were not just the leaders of separate families, but members of a single ruling council, and that every major crime traced back to them. But there was a problem. The Mafia was starting to sense something. Whispers of surveillance, unusual activity. Meetings were moved. Conversations became shorter, more cautious. Paranoia was growing, and paranoia inside the Mafia could be deadly. Because when bosses felt threatened, they didn't call lawyers. They ordered hits. December 16th, 1985. Manhattan. Outside Sparks Steakhouse. A cold night. Traffic moves slowly along 46th Street. Inside the restaurant, Paul Castellano finishes dinner with his underboss, Thomas Bellotti. They step outside, waiting for their car. Across the street, a group of men stands in the shadows, watching, waiting. Then gunfire. Multiple shooters move in. Silenced weapons. Precise. Brutal. Within seconds, Castellano is dead. Bellotti collapses beside him, the boss of the Gambino family. Executed in the open. The murder shocked the entire underworld, because it had not been approved by the commission. And in the Mafia, that was a declaration of war. The man behind it was rising rapidly within the Gambino family. A captain named John Gotti. Ambitious, charismatic, and dangerously bold. By eliminating Castellano, Gotti seized control of the most powerful crime family in New York. But in doing so, he shattered one of the Mafia's oldest rules. For the FBI, the timing was critical. The power structure was unstable. Trust was breaking down, and the bosses, those who remained, were under pressure, which made them vulnerable. Because when powerful men feel threatened, they make mistakes. Behind the scenes, prosecutors were preparing something unprecedented. A single case, a single trial, that would target the entire leadership of the Mafia. Not for one crime, but for everything. Murders, extortion, labor racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, all connected, all leading back to the commission. The indictment was massive. Dozens of charges, years of investigation, hundreds of hours of recorded conversations. And at the top of the list, the bosses themselves. Castellano had already been killed, but the others were still alive, still powerful, still believing they were untouchable. They were about to find out how wrong they were, because the case the FBI was building was not just another prosecution. It was a direct attack on the very structure of organized crime in America. And when it finally came to court, it would change the Mafia forever. But before the trial, before the verdict, there would be betrayals, secrets exposed, and a level of surveillance the Mafia had never faced before. Because for the first time, the government wasn't chasing criminals. It was dismantling an empire, and the men at the top had no idea how close they were to losing everything. February 25th, 1986. New York City. A federal courtroom fills slowly. Marble floors, wooden benches, armed marshals at every entrance. This is not a normal trial. This is history unfolding in real time. At the defense table sit the most powerful men in organized crime. Anthony Corallo, Carmine Persico, Vincent Giganti, present in name, but soon separated in proceedings. Philip Rostelli, and representing the fallen Gambino leadership. The shadow of Paul Castellano still lingers over the case. Each man dressed in expensive suits, calm, expressionless, but behind that silence, the foundation of their world is cracking. At the front of the courtroom stands the prosecution team, led by Rudolph Giuliani. Confident, relentless. This is his moment. Years of investigation have led to this trial, and his objective is simple: convince the jury that these men are not just mob bosses, but members of a single criminal command structure. The commission. The charges are overwhelming. Racketeering, extortion, labor union corruption, construction industry control, and most critically, conspiracy to commit murder. Not one isolated crime, but a pattern, a system, a business of crime. The defense strategy is equally clear. Deny everything. Challenge the existence of the commission. Argue that each family operates independently. Separate organizations. Separate decisions. No central authority. No conspiracy. Just coincidence. But the prosecution has something the Mafia cannot easily dismiss. Voices. The first major blow comes from the tapes. Recordings taken from the bug car of Anthony Corallo. The courtroom falls silent as jurors listen. Corallo's voice fills the room. Calm, measured, discussing business. Then he talks about the commission, about decisions being made collectively, about approval for murders, about territory disputes settled at the highest level. It is everything the Mafia has always denied. Now, it is being played back in a federal courtroom. One juror leans forward. Another takes notes. The illusion of secrecy begins to collapse. The recordings do not stop there. More tapes are introduced. Conversations between high-ranking members. Discussions about dividing construction contracts. About controlling unions. About punishing those who refuse to cooperate. The language is coded, but the meaning is clear. He's not with us anymore, a voice says. Everyone in the courtroom understands what that means. The prosecution carefully builds the narrative, piece by piece, tape by tape, showing that the Mafia is not chaos, but structure, not random violence, but organized control. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the pressure on the Mafia intensifies. Because this trial is not happening in isolation, the FBI continues its surveillance. Agents monitor social clubs, track movements, record meetings. The bosses are still operating, but now under constant watch. Every conversation feels dangerous. Every meeting feels exposed. Inside the Lucchese family, tension grows. Corallo knows the evidence against him is strong, too strong. He begins to limit communication, avoid unnecessary contact, trust fewer people, but it may already be too late. Within the Colombo family, Carmine Persico refuses to step back. Even from prison, he continues to issue orders, running his organization from behind bars, defiant, uncompromising. But his visibility becomes a liability, because the more he communicates, the more evidence he creates. And then there is Vincent Gigani, the boss of the Genovese family, a man who has built his reputation on deception. For years, he has walked the streets of New York in a bathrobe, mumbling to himself, pretending to be mentally unstable, a performance designed to avoid prosecution. But behind the act, he remains one of the most powerful figures in organized crime. The court will soon have to decide, is he insane, or is he one of the most calculating bosses in Mafia history? Back in the courtroom, the prosecution introduces another critical element, the concrete industry. Billions of dollars in contracts, controlled through intimidation, through fear, through coordination between families. Developers testify, reluctantly, carefully. They describe a system where bids are fixed, where companies are chosen not by merit, but by Mafia approval, where refusal leads to threats, delays, financial ruin. The concrete club, an invisible cartel operating in plain sight. And at the center of it, the commission. The defense attempts to discredit the witnesses, suggest coercion, exaggeration, misinterpretation, but the tapes remain, unchanging, unforgiving. Day after day, the evidence piles up. Jurors begin to see the pattern, the connections, the structure. But the Mafia is not passive. Behind the scenes, attempts are made to interfere. Messages are passed. Warnings are issued. The possibility of witness intimidation looms constantly. Security is tightened. Marshals escort jurors. Agents monitor potential threats. Because this is not just a trial. It is a confrontation between the federal government and an organization that has ruled the underworld for generations. Then comes one of the most damaging moments. The prosecution outlines specific murders tied to commission approval, hits that required authorization, decisions made not by individuals, but by the collective leadership. The implication is devastating. If the commission exists, then every boss sitting in that courtroom shares responsibility for every murder approved, for every crime committed under their authority. The defense sees the danger. They shift tactics, argue that even if discussions occurred, there was no formal structure, no binding authority, no enforceable system. But the jury has heard the tapes. They have heard the voices, and voices do not lie easily. As the weeks pass, the tension builds. Each side knows what is at stake. For the prosecution, a victory would reshape the fight against organized crime. For the Mafia, A conviction could dismantle decades of power. In quiet moments, the defendants sit motionless, listening, watching, calculating. But for the first time in their lives, they are not in control. Outside the courthouse, the streets of New York continue as usual. Traffic flows. Businesses open. People move on with their lives. But beneath the surface, the balance of power is shifting. Because if the government wins this case, the commission will no longer be invisible. It will be exposed, defined, proven. And once something is proven in court, it can be destroyed. As closing arguments approach, the atmosphere changes. The courtroom feels heavier, more final. Giuliani stands before the jury. He does not raise his voice. He does not dramatize. He simply lays out the truth as he sees it. A system of organized crime, a governing body, a commission. These men, he says quietly, did not just break the law, he pauses. They build a business around it. The defense responds with equal intensity. They warn of overreach, of assumptions, of a government trying to criminalize association. But the decision is no longer theirs. It belongs to the jury. And as deliberations begin, the most powerful men in the American Mafia wait for a verdict that could end everything. November 19th, 1986. New York City. The courtroom is silent. No whispers, no movement, only the sound of paper shifting as the jury files in. After months of testimony, weeks of deliberation, the decision has been made. At the defense table, the men who once ruled the underworld sit motionless. Anthony Corallo stares straight ahead. Carmine Persico remains composed, his expression unreadable. Philip Rostelli leans slightly forward, waiting. They had spent decades avoiding consequences. Now, everything comes down to this moment. The foreman stands. The first verdict is read. Guilty. No reaction. Then another. Guilty. And another. Guilty. Count after count. Charge after charge. Racketeering. Extortion. Conspiracy. Murder-related offenses. Each word lands like a hammer. The structure that had protected them for generations begins to collapse in real time. By the end of the reading, the outcome is undeniable. The leadership of the American Mafia has been convicted, not for isolated crimes, but for participating in a single, organized criminal enterprise. The commission. In the gallery, federal agents exchange quiet glances. They understand what has just happened. This is not just a victory. It is a turning point. Weeks later, the sentences are handed down. Anthony Corallo, 100 years in federal prison. Carmine Persico, 100 years. Philip Rostelli, 45 years. Other high-ranking figures connected to the case receive similarly devastating sentences. Life behind bars. No parole. No escape. For the first time in American history, the bosses are removed all at once. But the consequences go far beyond prison walls. Because the commission itself has been exposed, defined in court, proven beyond doubt. And once something is proven, it becomes a target. Across New York, the impact is immediate. Meetings stop. Communication slows. Trust disappears. The old system, the one that relied on coordination and shared power, begins to fracture. Within the Lucchese crime family, leadership is thrown into chaos. Corallo had ruled with discipline and caution. Now, without him, the family struggles to maintain control. Internal rivalries emerge. Decisions become uncertain. Inside the Colombo crime family, Carmine Persico continues to exert influence from prison. But distance weakens authority. Factions begin to form. Tensions rise. The seeds of future conflict are planted. The Bonanno crime family faces similar instability. Philip Rostelli's conviction leaves a vacuum. Power shifts quietly, unpredictably. But perhaps the most significant change is psychological. For decades, the Mafia had believed in its own invincibility. A code of silence, a system of protection, a belief that the bosses could never be touched. That illusion is gone. And in its place, fear. The FBI does not slow down. In fact, it accelerates. Because the success of the commission case proves something critical. The RICO Act works. Prosecutors across the country begin using the same strategy. Target the structure, target the leadership, build cases based on patterns, not just individual crimes. And one by one, the remaining pillars of organized crime begin to weaken. Then comes another shift. perhaps even more dangerous than prosecution. Informants. The code of omerta, the sacred vow of silence, starts to break. Because the consequences have changed. Before, prison was temporary. A few years, maybe a decade. Then freedom. Now, it is life. And when faced with life in prison, even the most loyal men begin to talk. Names are revealed. Operations exposed. Secrets that have been buried for decades come into the open. Among the most notable figures to emerge in the years following the commission trial is Salvatore Gravano, a high-ranking member of the Gambino crime family, a man deeply involved in the inner workings of the organization. Gravano does something once considered unthinkable. He cooperates. His testimony will later play a key role in bringing down one of the most infamous bosses in Mafia history, John Gotti. Gotti had risen to power through violence, through bold moves, through the murder of Paul Castellano. For a time, he seemed untouchable, nicknamed the Teflon Don, because charges never stuck. But the world had changed. The rules had changed, and the system that once protected him was gone. In 1992, John Gotti is convicted, sentenced to life in prison. Another boss, another fall, and it all traces back to the moment the commission was exposed. Even Vincent Gigante, who had avoided conviction in the original trial, would eventually face justice. His long-running act of insanity is exposed, proven to be a calculated deception. In 1997, Gigante pleads guilty. The last illusion fades. By the end of the 20th century, the American Mafia still exists, but it is no longer what it once was. The centralized power is gone. The commission no longer operates with the same authority. The families are weaker, more cautious, less visible. The golden era of organized crime has ended, and it ended not with a war, not with a massacre, but with a courtroom, a room filled with evidence, with voices, with truth. The commission trial did what decades of violence could not. It forced the Mafia into the light, and once exposed, it could never return to the shadows in the same way again. Today, the names of those men still echo through history. Corallo, Persico, Rostelli, Gotti, Gigante, once feared, once powerful, now remembered as symbols of a system that believed it was untouchable. But the lesson remains. In organized crime, power is never permanent, loyalty is never absolute, and silence does not last forever, because eventually, someone listens, someone records, someone speaks, and when they do, even the most powerful empire can fall.